Today we're going to be talking about what can be sown or grown in October, but also we're going to cover November, December and January as well. This is simply because our light levels are dropping and our opportunity of what we can grow with the frosts coming as well is going to be very much reduced now until February. So first of all, we're going to talk about October and what can be grown outside. And the first things that we're going to think of here is our garlic. So we did a garlic grow along last year, so if it's something that you're going to start this year for the first time, then you may want to check that out. And I will also do a video soon of what we can use as our garlic seed and whether or not we can pick up ones from the supermarket or use our homegrown ones as well. For me, I don't put my garlic in until the earliest being mid-month. I know some people start it in September, and it depends really on the variety and your conditions. You want to get it in before the ground is frozen, but you also don't want to get it in too early as well. So I find mid-October is about right for me, but there are certain varieties that I would also start more like in November if they are winter varieties rather than autumn varieties. October is a great month also to get onion sets in. You can either do this directly outside and plant them as you would your garlic very much, or you could start them in trays, get them developing and into a root system, and then plant them outside once they are a little bit more developed. For both of these, if you have a plot that does flood or any issues with very clay or damp soil, then starting them in trays, including your garlic, is something that might be a great benefit, and also having a few spare to fill any gaps of any that might rot or be stolen by birds or anything, and just give yourself a bit of a backup. But when we've got a very wet ground, it is going to be something that can rot quite easily. So to start them in trays is not going to upset their development at all, and just then plant them out as and when your ground is a little bit more dry. Broad beans and field beans can be started in October, but if you are starting them this early, they would be more so for a cover crop. If you want them to actually develop and to harvest the beans in early summer, then you'd be looking at starting them a little bit later. They will tolerate a frost, but they do a lot better if they are smaller when that frost is there for them. The end of October or early November is the time that I would be looking at getting in any broad or field beans that I want to actually take a crop from. Towards the end of October, we could also look at growing some overwintering peas. These can be sown directly outside if you haven't got many issues with rodents. But if you have, then starting them in a tunnel or a greenhouse and keeping them up high and away from the rodents if you can will be really helpful, and then plant them out when they are large enough. Winter lettuces, claytona, and corn salad can also be started this month. I personally would start them in trays and then move them outside once they're a little bit more developed. But if you don't have that option, then you can sow them directly. Just sow them a little bit thicker and then thin them when they are a little bit bigger. Undercover in October, we could also sow things like kohlrabi, and this is going to be very much more maybe for those down south or the Midlands. If you find that the kohlrabi doesn't do as well this time of the year, or you don't want to take that chance if you're up north, then it may be a little bit too late for this brassica that does like a little bit more protection. You could also sow some hardier varieties of carrots like Amsterdam forcing or autumn king into the beds in your polytunnel or greenhouse, or even in a cold frame. Somewhere with a little bit of protection would really be beneficial for them, and then you should get an earlier harvest, but you want to make sure that you do harvest them before they run to seed in the spring, because they are biennials. So once that spring weather comes along, they will want to put up flowers. So you'll be harvesting these as baby carrots rather than full grown carrots. We could also grow lots of different salad leaves under cover as well during October and get them established before those light levels drop too much. Things like our rocket and mizuna, our winter lettuces will do very well in the tunnel. We are doing a winter salads grow along, so if you haven't checked that one out, there is still time to join in and sow some as well if you want to. Undercover, we can also sow things like spring onions, and they will just very slowly put on some growth over the winter for us. Undercover during October, we can also think about sowing some flowers. The main one that comes to mind at this point would be for some sweet peas. When we grow sweet peas and overwinter them, they usually give us a longer stem, which would be better for vase life, and then they will also produce earlier in the season for us. You do want an area that you can keep them frost protected, but not necessarily temperature protected. So they'll happily go down to -5, but if they have a frost, that frost could do some damage. So it really depends on what your setup is and how the winter is. But it is a good idea if you can to get some in. And if anyone is interested in doing a grow along of this, then that is something that I'm happy to do. I get mine in usually around mid-October, so do let me know as soon as possible if you are interested in a grow along of sweet peas. Other flowers that we can get in at this time of the year as well, and sooner is better, so in October, the earlier part of this month would be great. But if you think about those plants that are growing outside and they're now putting on lots of seeds, those ones are often the ones that are going to be given a good chance to sow now and then over winter. So these are things like lupins, delphiniums, yarrows, granny's bonnets, and foxgloves as well. So just have a look around the garden. You might find that you've got plants that are producing some seeds, and it would be a good opportunity to just sprinkle them in a little bit of compost and see how they do. If you've never tried this before, then over winter we're really going to be looking at not overwatering them. They will also grow very slowly, but what they will be doing is putting on a good root brace, and then come when the light levels improve in February, you should see quite a larger amount of growth than waiting for those spring sown ones that can take a while to catch up at that point. Now we're looking at November, and outdoors we are very much looking at our broad beans and our overwintered peas, and this will be something that you want to get in earlier in the month rather than too late, especially if you're further up north in the UK. You can also grow broad beans under cover if you have the space as well, and you can sow these a little bit earlier in November if you want to, because they'll have that protection from the frost that our outdoor ones won't have. And then we can also continue to grow some of those winter leaves, particularly the winter salads and lettuces. They will grow very slowly at this point, so getting them in a little bit earlier and trying to get them established is better, rather than having weaker plants that are really struggling from the light later on in the month. There isn't really anything that I would suggest that will do well in December. It's a good time just to have a little bit of a rest and enjoy Christmas, let's face it. But one thing that you can do is move or plant rhubarb, and also throughout these months really think about adding fruit trees and things like that that will have the time to get established. You want to do this before your ground is too frozen, but once it has got that little bit cooler. Outside in January, we can also continue planting some of our shallots and the onions from sets. You can also at this point start thinking about growing onions from seed. Traditionally, they are started on Boxing Day, but any time after this, I tend to wait until sort of late January, February, and they really then get established before they are ready to be planted out. Under cover, we can start looking at some early carrots and radishes and things like that that are going to produce some early harvests for us, as well as some more salad leaves and winter lettuces. You could also sow another batch of winter hardy peas or mange tous. If you have lighting and heat mats in order to start seeds a little bit early, then January is also a great month to start chilies and peppers from seeds, because they do really enjoy a long season to get them as established as possible. Throughout any of these months, microgreens might be a great option and can be something that kids really enjoy, or if you just want a little bit of green something in order to add to salads and just to pep up your plate a little bit, then they're a great addition. You can also use some of your seeds that you've got left over if you're going to be buying more for this rather than buying microgreen seeds. There are lots of different options, from growing peas to beetroot and brassicas. There are so many different things, so you don't necessarily need to go out there and buy seeds specifically for this if you have a stash of them from magazines and things like that.